When I work with couples, one of the things I run into that really creates problems for open communication in couples is the tendency to restrict topics, to call certain topics off limit, as well as limit the number of ways in which couples can communicate. That's a general principle of communication, that in long-term relationships, the communication channel, metaphorically, tends to narrow, get clogged up with things. We first fall in love, we first develop a relationship, and almost anything's fair game, at least at the beginning. But then as we get to know each other, we stumble into each other's blind spots. We stumble into topics that make us uncomfortable, one or both of us. We stumble into taboo topics, things that maybe our culture or family or geography say shouldn't be talked about. We fight, and some fights seem unresolvable, and so we start avoiding those topics. That's a lot of things to avoid. That's a lot of issues to not address and work through. Give it enough time, and that channel significantly narrows. It becomes harder and harder to talk to each other. And if you've been on the planet any time at all, you've already seen this. Even if you're pretty young, you've seen how communication gets more restricted, at least for some people, and it gets harder to talk. That keeps up long enough, you're going to have real problems having important conversations about crucial issues, have trouble being direct about things that are bothering you, and vice versa. The mission has to be this: we have to work to keep the channel wide. I often call it widening the channel, because most of us don't understand this until the channel's significantly gunked up, blocked. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing you got to start working on as a couple is not avoiding risky topics, which is another way of saying risking conflict. The two things go together. Every couple on earth has created topics, and it's not a conscious thing usually, but it's a list of things one or both people avoid. We don't talk about my discomfort with your mother. We don't talk about how the kids spend their free time on the weekends. We don't talk about money because money's uncomfortable. We had a big fight over it, or a couple of big fights over it, or we can't seem to talk about it. Well, those topics accumulate, but those problems don't go away. The mother-in-law, the way the kids manage their time, our money issues have to be talked about at some point. But if we're in the habit of avoiding them, that stuff will build until either we have explosive fights or worse problems happen. We begin to shut down, pull away, talk about falling out of love. And a lot of the time, that's not the problem. We don't know how to talk to each other anymore. That's huge. So again, first goal is to start practicing not avoiding risky topics, risking conflict. And I have a lot more to say about that in this and other videos, but seeing conflict as one more communication tool. I'm not talking about knockdown, drag out fights. I'm not talking about saying stupid, hurtful things to each other, which is the experience of a lot of us. I'm talking about addressing a difficult topic and seeing it as something we have to work out together. We have to risk our upset. We have to risk each other's upset. We have to risk the topic being uncomfortable. We even have to risk not necessarily immediately solving it. I'll say more about that in a minute. But we have to be willing to engage in conflict, willing to have difficult conversations. With some basic tools, some very basic tools, we can do that pretty skillfully, pretty quickly. And it's amazing what happens to communication when you feel safer and safer talking about topics you've been avoiding. Some people call this coming off eggshells or walking on eggshells. It's a great metaphor. If you start to hear eggshells crunching underneath your feet, walk over those suckers and get off the eggshells. Talk about what you need to talk about. One. Second piece is taboo topics. This can be kind of related to topics you'll learn to avoid, but taboo topics are often cultural, they're often family-based, they can even be geographical. So for instance, Americans have a hard time talking about sex, at least a lot of Americans. Sex is seen as a taboo topic, a topic polite people don't talk about. Well, this just in, couples have to talk about sex. In some couples and cultures, you shouldn't talk about drugs, but you're concerned that your kids are doing drugs, but you can't talk about it. I can go on this way for an hour. Every group, every couple, every family, every culture develops taboo topics. You have to be able, as a couple, to look at them square in the eye and find ways to talk about them. That can be really uncomfortable. That can make people very anxious, Same thing for avoiding conflict topics. But that anxiety is stopping the communication you've got to have. I'm going to say a lot more about anxiety in upcoming videos. But for the moment, no topic can be sacred in the sense that no topic should just not be talked about. When we talk about widening the channel, we're saying anything is fair game. Politics is another example. You can avoid politics sometimes, but you can't avoid the ramifications of politics in the family. For instance, we can't go see your parents because they're only conservative, or they're only liberal, or they're only this. And so we have all these things we don't talk about. For instance, how we're going to manage conversation, how we're going to deal with the in-laws or my parents, etc., because the topic itself feels too risky to bring up. Okay. Which is another way of saying my next recommendation is practice being as direct as possible. Doing everything in your power to say what's on your mind, both thoughts and feelings, and trusting that you're going to get better at doing that with your partner, and you're going to see it as, again, a collaborative activity. Get it said. Once something is breached, a topic is out in the world, it's got a chance to be talked about. One of my favorite quotes, I say this to my clients all the time, is it's better to ask forgiveness than permission. I'm not sure that's a good idea if you're going to rob a bank, but if you're going to talk to people about stuff that matters to you, especially those that are closest to you, like your partner, like your kids, like maybe your parents or your best friends, sometimes even coworkers, get it said. We all have come to find people in our lives who just speak whatever's on their mind. They're often annoying and sometimes they're disruptive, but most of us secretly envy them for their capacity to just speak their mind. I'm encouraging you today to work towards being that person. So in summary, widen the channel. The more a couple can talk about anything, the more resilient they are, the more agile they are, the more they're capable of dealing with really hard situations or issues, illness, death, job changes, moves, etc. It's the couples that can't talk that find themselves getting more and more brittle, less and less able to roll with the punches because there's too much crap in the channel. Thanks for watching.